when I was 21 back in 1987. And I think one of the most extraordinary things about my experience is that normally I don't have a very good memory. Like, I can't remember what I had for dinner last night. But when I had my experience, I remember every single detail, every single thing I saw, everything people told me as if it happened yesterday. And I think that has to be something from God as a gift from my near death experience, because I didn't really come back with any particular gifts or any particular abilities, except for having the ability to remember every single thing that I saw.
This is Dale Cross. Welcome to another edition of Soul Inspire. This is the audio video podcast that features spiritually uplifting stories from awakening souls to help inspire you on your own soul journey. On this episode, it is my extreme pleasure to welcome to the show John J. Davis. John J. Davis has one of the most detailed and spectacular near-death experiences that I have ever heard. So it is my extreme pleasure to welcome him to the show. John, welcome.
Dale, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be on your show. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Oh, the pleasure is all
I
mine.
love the opportunity to share my story. So thank you for letting me share my story on your channel.
Absolutely, absolutely. So why don't we just start out with, if you want, you can go right into that near-death experience story if you want, and start us off with
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I'll tell you how this whole thing happened, and I want to kind of let your audience know something up front. This happened when I was 21 back in 1987. And I think one of the most extraordinary things about my experience is that normally I don't have a very good memory. Like, I can't remember what I had for dinner last night. But when I had my experience, I remember every single detail, every single thing I saw, everything people told me as if it happened yesterday. And I think that has to be something from God as a gift from my near death experience, because I didn't really come back with any particular gifts or any particular abilities, except for having the ability to remember every single thing that I saw. And that's why my story is so detailed, because I do remember everything. Well, this is kind of how it started. My dad was in sales, and he won a sales contest. And one of the things that he won were these two mopeds, or what we call scooters now. And we used to ride them all the time, especially on the weekends. Well, on one of these weekends, I had an accident, and I slammed into a tree. And the way that I landed, I tore the tendons off my right hand. And I had to go into surgery to have them reattached and repaired. Well, being only 21, I had never really spent much time in a hospital at all. And I'd never had surgery, so I had no idea what the effects of anesthesia are. Well, the day the surgery comes and they go to give me the anesthesia as an injection, and I had a really terrible allergic reaction, and it stopped my heart. And I actually died for 7 minutes. Well, the extraordinary thing, my whole story happened in a 7 minute time period. But from my perspective, it felt like I was on the other side for an hour. I could not believe that it was only 7 minutes of Earth time. So when I share my story, it seems like this is so much longer than 7 minutes. And it was to me, because on the other side, they don't have time there like we do. The time constraints are totally different. So here's how this whole thing started. So they gave me the anesthesia. I died. The very next instant, I woke up and I was standing in the most beautiful building I have ever seen. It was white polished marble, and it was a long, long corridor. This building was just so long, I could not see the end of it. It had to have been miles long. We have nothing like it here on Earth. To my immediate right were these gorgeous 20 or 30-foot marble columns. They were about 6 feet apart, and they went all the way down as far as you could see. In the center of this building where I was standing were these tables, kind of the size of an ordinary kitchen table, but they were square. And on each side of the table were these marble benches. And every one of these tables had two people sitting there. It was either two men, two women, man or a woman, all the way down as far as you could see. To the left of me, well, the only way that I can describe this is that they look like tunnels, doorways that had been cut out of the solid marble, absolute perfect doorways with 90-degree angles, just like a door. But when you looked at it, it was black. You couldn't see anything. It was like looking into space. And one thing I want to mention, right about this time, somebody in my left ear said to me, "My name is Alan. I'm your spirit guide." I had never heard of a spirit guide before. I had no idea what that was. So as this whole thing unfolded, I just listened to him, and he took me to all these different places on the other side. That's how I'm able to share with your audience the things that I saw. And he told me every time he took me somewhere, he took me to the outside first, and then he took me to the inside of these buildings and explained to me what they were. Well, where I was, it was like being on a college campus. You know how a college campus has their science building, or they have their English building, and they have their history building, but it's all in a general location? That's kind of what it felt like where I was. I was on, or I was in a specific area on the other side, what people call heaven or the afterlife. And they showed me a place that was super, super full of people and super busy, but I only saw one small part of the other side. So everything that I'm sharing, it's only a small part. I want to clarify one more thing also, because I think this will make more sense to your listeners. When my experience started, when I was standing in that building, I didn't have the typical near death experience that a lot of people have. What you hear a lot of times is the person will have some kind of an accident, or they're having surgery and they die. And all of a sudden, they're floating above their bodies. They can look down and they can see everybody working on them. And then they become aware of a tunnel. And at the end of the tunnel is a white light. And normally, what happens as they start moving down this tunnel, they're met by someone, either a grandparent, a parent, a sibling, a friend, someone who crossed before them that they know. And that person tells them, "It's not your time. You have to go back." Well, we never knew what happens when a person walks into that light until my experience. What they did with me is they bypassed all of that and they put me on the other side of the white light.
Wow.
So as someone goes down the tunnel, when they walk into the light, they end up where I was, in the orientation center. And I think my guide took me there because he wanted me to tell people what happens when they cross into that light. Because my story is just a piece of the jigsaw puzzle. Just like all the other NDEers out there, we're all trying to figure out what this puzzle looks like. And I think one of the most significant parts of my puzzle piece was that I know now what happens when they cross into the light. So here's how my story unfolds.
Right.
My guide told me to look up at the next tunnel. And as I looked up, there was a gentleman coming through. He was an elderly man, probably in his 80s or 90s, and he had his right hand over his chest, over the left side of his chest, like he was holding his heart, like he had pain. And my guide said he just died of a heart attack. Well, he came through the tunnel, and as he walked through the light into the tunnel, into the orientation center, this woman stood up who was at this table. She stood up and she walked over to him, and she took his hands in hers, And she walked him to the table and they sat down. She had him sit across from her. And the whole time she was holding his hands. Well, my guide told me that what these people are, they're called orientation counselors. And their job, kind of a lot of people on the other side have jobs. And it's not like a job that we have here on earth where you have to go to your job because you got to pay bills and all this. People on the other side, they have jobs. They do the things that they absolutely love to do. And that's one of the reasons I can't wait to get back because it's such an extraordinary place to be. It's such an extraordinary place of love and joy, and I just can't wait. So she was talking to him. Well, what she was doing and what the jobs are of the orientation counselors, their job is to orientate people back from their lifetime. And the reason that they're there is so many of us don't remember where we're from. When we come into a lifetime, and I only thing I can say that this has to be a God thing because I don't understand how it works, but we don't remember where we're from. When you come into a lifetime, the only memories that you have are the memories that you create or the memories you have in this life.
Mhm.
So when you die and you finish your lifetime, you don't always remember where you're from. Well, that's what these orientation counselors do. They basically tell you you just finished your life. Now you're back home on the other side, and we're going to get you all reacquainted and reoriented. And as she was telling him this, my guide said to watch him. So I was watching this man, and Dale, the craziest thing happened. He changed. He began to change from an elderly gentleman into
Mhm.
a young man in his late 20s or early 30s.
Cool.
And my guide said, all of us on the other side are in our 30s. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it has anything to do with Jesus's life. I don't know, but
Mhm.
we're all young on the other side. Well, as she was done talking to him and he changed back to his normal self, he remembered where he was from, remembered that the other side, that's our real home. Earth isn't our home. Earth is just a place that we come to learn and to experience and to grow spiritually, but it's not home. Heaven, the other side, the afterlife, whatever you want to call it, that's where we're from. Well, once she was done talking to him, he stood up and he walked off to the right and he walked down between these columns. And where he walked into is the only thing I can describe it as I call it the gardens. It was the most beautiful gardens that I've ever seen. The greenest grass, flowers, and trees and plants. It looked like a perfectly um, a perfect garden that you would see in England. It was that just perfect. And there were all these people there, and they were applauding, they were laughing, they were hugging this man. Well, what I found out, my guide said that after you have your orientation, you have a reunion, and all the people that you knew in your life who passed are there waiting for you, as well as all the friends and family members and people you already knew on the other side. And here's why. I found out that when a person comes into an earth life, they come to this planet, it's a really big deal because Earth, and I found this out from my guide, Earth is the hardest of all the planets. There are many, many souls who don't want to come here because it is so hard.
Mhm.
So when a person finishes their lifetime and they go back, it's a really big deal when you finish a lifetime because that's what success is. Success
Mhm.
isn't about how much money you make or what kind of house you live in or what kind of car you drive or your salary. That doesn't matter to the other side. It makes no difference to God. God's not going to ask you, well, tell me how much money you made in your life or how big your house was. That none of that stuff matters. What matters is that you came here, you survived, you did your best, and think about all the learning that you're taking with you. That's what matters. And that's why it's such a big deal to have that reunion. All those people are there to congratulate you. And my guide said the reunion is one of the happiest moments when people come back from a lifetime. They see all of their family and friends again.
That is beautiful.
Well,
So
yeah,
these people are, you mind me asking, do they appear translucent, or are they solid, or how is that in your experience?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. They look just like we do.
So solid.
That's
Yeah.
solid. And
Hmm.
I can't explain it, but
Hmm.
nobody there is a ball of light.
Okay.
Everybody there, they look just like you and I do. Everybody has their own appearance. They're solid. The
Hmm.
bodies over there, they're different than they are with the physical body. Our physical bodies are not perfect. They
Hmm.
age, they have diseases, they get injured. The bodies on the other side are perfect bodies. And it's kind of like our bodies on earth are replicas of what the bodies are on the other side. And I think that that's how God created us. We have perfect bodies over there. And then he created this whole schematic for us to come into lifetimes to learn and created these bodies as replicas of what they are on the other side. Because the
Okay.
other side is our true self, how we really appear, our real bodies. So something I want to tell your audience, there's a temple in the country of Turkey, and it's called the Temple of Artemis, Artemis. And I found it just by luck. But the reason I want to share that is because it looks like the building that I saw in the orientation center,
Oh,
this huge, long building with columns all along the perimeter. And this Temple of Artemis looks exactly like the orientation center. So they can go look it up and do a Google search and they can see what it looked like.
yeah, for
Well,
sure.
here's
That
what
would be so
happens
cool.
next. Yeah, it is. It's really cool. So then this is what started this whole process now. My guide took me to these different places. He took me to the outside of each building, and then he took me to the inside to explain to me what these buildings are for. Well, the next building he took me to was a rectangular building. Again, it was beautiful white marble, and it had columns all along the perimeter. And then he took me to the inside, and one of the rooms that I was in was a round theater, like a movie theater, but it was round. And on the top, on the ceiling, were these movie screens, but they were all in a circle. There must have been maybe 12 or 15 of these movie screens all up at the top. And all of a sudden, they turned on. And every one of these movie screens was playing a different episode of my life. And it was like watching a movie. One was of me as a little child, a little infant. Another one was of me as a toddler. Another one was of me entering kindergarten. And every screen had a different episode of my lifetime up to the age that I was, which was 21. And my guide said every time somebody comes back from a lifetime, they have a life review. And the whole point of the life review is to see if you accomplished the things you wanted to accomplish when you came into your lifetime. Because none of our lives are an accident. There are no accidents that we come into a lifetime. All of us actually plan our lives ahead of time. And we all have a life review just to see how we did. And I thought that was absolutely extraordinary because you think that your life doesn't matter. You think it, but it's a big deal, and that's why you have a life review. So that was what I call the life review building. That was the second place that he took me to. The third building he took me to, again, was a rectangular building. Again, it had marble columns on the outside of it. He took me to the inside, and this one looked very much like a regular movie theater looks like we have today. It's got the screen up front. Well, this part of my NDE was really hard for me because he showed me that we have lifetimes, that our earth life that we're living right now is not the only life that we've had. And that was hard for me because I was raised a Catholic,
Okay.
and is in Catholicism, they don't talk about having other lifetimes.
Right.
They only talk about the one life, that you only have one life.
Mhm.
But my guide explained to me that we have existed for billions of years. I can't even explain how far back God created us, but we
Mm.
live for eternity. We never die. And during that time period, we can have many, many lifetimes. Not everybody has a lifetime on Earth. And I'll mention this a little bit later, but there are millions of other planets that we can have lifetimes on. Earth is not the only one. So what he did is he took me to this building and he showed me three different lifetimes. And the reason was he wanted me to be able to tell people, just like your audience, that past lifetimes really are real. And the first one he showed me was I was a monk and I had a shaved head. I was wearing a red gown and I was in a monastery. And my job was to teach these kids about being a monk in a monastery.
Mm.
And every in these different lifetimes he showed me, I was able to know where I was, like what part of the world I was in. This one was somewhere in Southeast Asia. The net screen went blank. Then he put another lifetime. It was like watching a movie. The second one, I was a shoe peddler. And this lifetime was somewhere in Europe, Eastern Europe. And I had a wheelbarrow, and in the wheelbarrow were all these shoes. And I was a shoe peddler. So what I did for that community in that lifetime, I fixed people's shoes. And in that little segment that he showed me, I was pushing this wheelbarrow along and I would drop off the shoes at people's homes or people's houses in that lifetime. Then that one went blank. Then he showed the third one, and the third one was of me as a fisherman. And I was standing in a little wooden boat on a lake, and I had nets that I was casting the nets into the lake. And part of what I did in that lifetime was a fisherman to help feed the village. And that was somewhere in the Middle East. Well, this part of my NDE was so confusing to me because I never knew anything about past lifetimes. It was a shock to me. Well, after my NDE, about 2 months later, I went to see a hypnotherapist because I wanted to know if what I saw was real, that I wasn't just making this up somehow. So I told her that I wanted to see if past lifetimes were real. We began the session, and sure enough, I was able to see three other additional lifetimes. And that's when I believed, okay, oh my gosh, we really do have past lifetimes. We live forever. And of
Mm.
course, we're going to have more than one life. I never met anybody that only had one lifetime. So that was the past life building. The next thing he took me to, and this was probably the most, of all the buildings that he took me to, this one was probably the most beautiful. It was circular, a circular building, and it had marble columns all around the circle of this building, and it had a big dome on top. I can't explain how large these buildings were. We have nothing like them here on Earth. They're just enormous. In this building, my guide didn't explain to me why this is, but he just said this is where we go when we want to plan a lifetime, and our guide comes with us. Our guide actually helps us plan our lifetime. So he took me in the building and he took me to one of the tables. And one of the tables had a scroll on it. And it was a rolled up scroll with a blue ribbon around it. And my guide said, "This is your life scroll." And what he was telling me was that everybody who comes into a lifetime, whether it's on Earth or some other planet, you actually write out what you want to accomplish. And it was kind of like what a lot of us do when we do New Year's resolutions at the beginning of every year. That's kind of like what you do when you plan a life. And I don't know why we write them out on these scrolls, but for whatever reason, that's what we do. We put down what country we're going to live in, what language are we going to learn, who our parents are going to be. Are we going to have siblings? Are we going to Are we going to go to university? What kind of a career are we going to have? Are we going to have kids? All of these things go into a lifetime. Well, I took off the ribbon and I rolled the scroll out on the table, and I immediately saw that it was all full of black lettering. It was written in black lettering, and do you remember when you were a kid and you had um, what do they call it? It's calligraphy. Do you remember calligraphy
Yep.
writing?
Yes. Yes, I do.
It it
Yep.
it looked like it looked like you took a pen, one of
Hmm.
those ink pens, dipped it in the inkwell, and then wrote it. It looked like that. Well, as I went to try to read it, it folded up again, and I wasn't allowed to read what I had written. And the reason was because it might interfere with the goals that I had written for myself. Because one of the reasons that we come into a lifetime is we come in because we want to learn, we want to grow, and we want to develop. And it's not that we can't learn on the other side, we still learn. It's just that you don't have the experience of negativity. The other side is perfect. There's no war, there's no hunger, there's no disease, there's no poverty. None of that exists there. It only exists here on earth. And that's one of the primary reasons why so many souls choose to come here, because the only way that you learn something, I shouldn't say the only way, but one of the most effective ways for us to learn is when we go through something hard, something challenging. And if you look back at your own life and you think, all those tough things I went through in my lifetime, whether they were breakups or job losses or a health concern, all these different things that happen to us, when we get to the other side of that, when we work through it, we have so much growth and we're so much better because of it. And that's one of the reasons why we come here. I think that from my experience, there are really two primary reasons why we're here. The first one is to learn, and the second one is to help people. And one of my favorite quotes is from the Dalai Lama. And I think he hit the nail on the head when he said, our prime purpose in this life is to help others. And if you can't help them, at least don't hurt them. And I love that. I've always tried to live my life that way, because that's really what does matter, is your own learning, and do you help people along the way. So on the right hand side of me in this building, where I was looking at my scroll, there was this huge wall. It had to have been blocks, if not a mile long. And what it was full of scrolls. Every person's scroll who was in a lifetime now, their scroll is on that wall. So when they come back from a lifetime, they get that scroll, they open it, and they review what they did, or did they learn what they wanted to learn? Did they have the experiences that taught them what they wanted to learn? And we all come in for different reasons. Everybody has a different reason as to why they come into a lifetime. Maybe they want to learn what it's like to lose someone, or they want to learn what it's like to have children, or they want to experience, something hard with a work situation. And that's the reason why we come in. The next thing he took me to, I thought was absolutely extraordinary. Have you ever seen Encyclopedia Britannicas?
Yes, when I was a child.
Yeah, that's how I remember them too.
Yeah.
They're all the same. They all look like they're
Mhm.
kind of like 2-inch thick books.
Yeah.
And he took me to a place in this building that it looked like a library, but all the books were the same. They all had the same look to them, and they were all on these big bookshelves. All of the books have gold lettering, and instead of going across the top, the letters went down vertically. And he took me to a book, and what he told me was that everybody has a soulmate. He took me to my soulmate's book, and it said Nina, Nina. My
Hmm.
soulmate's name is Nina. When God created us, every one of us has a soulmate that is our special person for eternity. And a lot of people that I've met, have always wondered, am I ever going to find my soulmate here on earth? Am I ever going to get married? Am I going to have a relationship? Am I going to have a family? And people really panic about that, thinking that they have to find their soulmate. Well, I don't know if the soulmate actually comes into a lifetime with you,
Oh, okay.
because one of the things that we learn from the most is through having relationships. That's what teaches us so much. And if your soulmate came into a lifetime with you, you wouldn't have anything to learn because they would be your perfect mate.
Right.
And one thing that I find so encouraging about this soulmate concept is that even in your lifetime, if you don't find your perfect mate, if you don't ever get married or you get divorced and you feel discouraged about ever finding someone, you always have that person on the other side. And here's something that I like to tell people because it was such a profound learning for me. The reason that we take on tough challenges when we come into a lifetime, it has to do with perspective. On the other side, when you're there, because there's no such thing as time like we know it, a lifetime seems like a few weeks or a couple of months, and then you're back on the other side. But when you get here in Earth and you're actually living a lifetime, you could live to be 70, 80, or 90, and it feels like a really long time.
Mhm.
That's one of the reasons that we come into a lifetime and choose tough things, because we know that we can survive that. It's only going to be a little while until we're back home again. And this has a lot to do with how we grieve when somebody passes. When someone passes to the other side, they still grieve for the people that they left behind, but their grief is different. They know from their perspective that it's going to be a short time until everyone's together again. But for us here on earth, we don't remember anything about the other side. And we think that our grief is going to last forever, that it's never going to end. But it's not true. When we pass over, we have all those people with us again. And all that grieving, all that heartache, all that hardship just becomes a memory. And it makes you better than what you were when you first came into that life. Again, the whole idea of learning. So that was the concept of the soulmate, that whether you find somebody here or not, every single one of us has a perfect mate. Sometimes they do come into a lifetime with you, and I don't know what the circumstances are. I just
Mhm.
don't know if they come into a lifetime with us very often. So does
Okay.
that kind of make sense? Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So you had mentioned earlier on when you were describing this that God doesn't care, for example, he's not going to say, well, how much money did you make? What kind of a car did you drive, etc. So that makes sense. I have
Right.
another question for you though. It seems like in when it comes to religion, there's a huge idea that God is this, not only is he, and I don't know how you can have both, not only is he love, but he's also this judge that condemns and does care about the different actions you do, like if you harm others and so on and so forth. Can you speak to
Mhm.
that? Like, did you get a sense of the idea that God is a kind of judge, or is he just unconditional love?
Absolutely. I'm happy to answer that because that's something that I thought about also.
Hmm.
What was so interesting about going to the other side is when you're there, you can feel God. We don't feel God here on earth. And it's like when you're on earth, it feels like you're in a battle and you're in a foxhole without a radio. You feel cut off from your source. When we're on the other side, back home again, you can actually feel how much God loves you, how much God cherishes every single one of us. It's the most profound love I have ever felt. And I love my kids. And the love that God has for us, that's the only thing I can even begin to equate that to, is what I feel for my kids. That's how God feels for every one of us.
Hmm.
God, in my experience when I was there, The love that is this being that we call God is so incredibly profound. I don't think he's capable of creating a place like hell. I
Right.
didn't get the impression that if you don't believe in Jesus, when you die, we're going to send you to hell. I didn't get that. I got the very hard impression that there is no hell, that God didn't create a hell. Now there are, on the other side, there are levels of development, levels of spirituality,
Mhm.
that when a person crosses, whatever they learn, whatever development that they're on, that's the level that they go to. Well, there are also lower levels, and from my understanding, those levels are where undeveloped souls go until they have enough lifetimes that they learn and they can elevate above some of those lower levels. And I think when people say that they saw hell in their near death experience, I think they're referring to the lower levels, because
Okay.
one of the most profound things I learned is that God doesn't judge you. Nobody judges us. That's the whole purpose of the life review, is your guide goes with you when you have your life review
Mhm.
and you look to see all the things that you learned. Well, one of the most poignant things about the life review is not only do you see yourself on those screens. Remember that building, that one
Yeah.
building with the round, all the screens on top?
Yes.
When you're there watching your life, you can feel, if you hurt somebody, you can feel what they felt.
Okay.
So somebody who, let's say somebody commits murder, they do
Hmm.
some kind of horrific act to somebody else. Nothing is hidden from God. So you will feel what every victim felt that you perpetrated your crime on.
Okay.
And I think that is going to be one of the hardest things, I think, to experience, is if you intentionally, purposely hurt somebody, you
Hmm.
feel what they felt. And that's how a person learns. That's the difference between someone who would never dream of hurting somebody versus
Hmm.
somebody else who thinks that it's okay to do that because they haven't learned yet. And God gives everybody as many chances as they need to progress and to learn.
Yeah. So this idea of a permanent punishment doesn't seem to resonate in your
No,
story. Like
absolutely not at
you're
all.
saying God gives a chance after chance after chance, and when you keep coming back after each life, you get this sort of panoramic review where you actually relive every moment of your action, not only the way you felt, but the way all the people felt. And then there's probably this ripple. I've heard other people
Exactly.
talk about it in the near-death experience
Yep.
stories, where the ripple you can not only feel in the way the victim felt, but then that had a ripple effect on many, many others, and it just goes on and
Yes.
on and on. You can feel the whole thing. So that would be pretty intense, I imagine.
Yes, exactly. And I would think that when you look at some of the things, when I first started doing this kind of work,
Mhm.
I did not realize how many tough situations people have to go through. The loss of a child, the loss of your spouse, a cancer diagnosis, some horrific thing. And the things that people survive here are worse than I could ever imagine hell being. Just some of the, like, if you lose one of your children to cancer, that's absolutely horrible. I
Horrible.
can't imagine how could anything be worse than having to experience that.
Yeah.
So the idea of hell, that's even a better alternative. I never want to experience the loss of one of my kids. I just don't want to do that. And I think that would be pure hell.
Be awful. Yeah, so it seems like the hell is more like a state of mind, and it's an experience that we create for ourselves more than it is that God would create it for us. It's we
Yeah.
create that.
And when we first started, you asked me about religion. Did my experience change religion? It absolutely, what it did for me is it made me realize that the other side doesn't have religion. You're not going to find Christians. You're not going to find Buddhists. You're not going to find um, Islam. The religion. is replaced by spirituality, because
Mm-hmm.
religion was invented by humankind.
Right.
God didn't invent religion. Religion was invented by humans to try to figure out, what are we doing here? Where are we from? Is there a
Mm-hmm.
God? What's the purpose of all of this?
Mm-hmm.
So so my whole philosophy changed. I wasn't in fact, I tell people that I'm 50% Christian, because I believe in what Jesus came here to teach. Talk about love, kindness, compassion, non-judgment. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe in all the dogma of religion.
The fear-based stuff.
Exactly. Because
Right, right.
that's one thing that I did not get from God when I was on the other side, is any kind of fear.
So can I ask you this? Is
Yeah.
so we focus on the fact that there's a life review that shows like if you were if a being maybe perpetrated some things and harm some people, but is it also the opposite true? So if you are you showing the acts of kindness that you did,
Yes.
and then the ripple
And
effect of that and how that felt for everybody? That would be cool, right?
absolutely. Yes. Yeah. In fact, one of the things that they showed me was, when I was in elementary school, there was a little boy named Troy, and he had a really difficult time walking. He had to walk with braces. And on my life review, they were showing me one time he fell on the playground, and I ran over and helped pick him up.
Mhm.
And they showed that on the life review. And it's things like that that we never think make any difference. But
Mhm.
those are the things that are huge on the other side. That's why they don't care about material things.
Sure.
I've met so many people that think that they never became a success in life because they didn't have money, they didn't have possessions, they didn't have bank accounts, and because that doesn't matter to the other side.
Mhm.
This society is so backwards compared to what's really true, what really matters. So,
Mhm.
do we have a limit with
No,
Zoom?
you can go a little longer. I
Okay,
think,
good.
yeah, you're fine for now.
Okay, good. Because
Yeah.
I'm only about halfway done.
Okay. Yeah, we should be good. Yeah, yeah. About
Okay, good.
another 45 minutes left, I think, on
Okay,
this. Yeah,
perfect, perfect.
yeah.
Well, the next place he took me to, I think, is one of my favorite experiences when I had my near-death experience. He took me to a building that looked like a sports stadium. Absolutely just a huge, huge building. So we took me to the inside, and inside were thousands of seats. And it was just me and my guide, and there was a gentleman behind me. And the building that I was in was a planetarium. Remember, as a kid, you probably took field trips to planetariums when you were in school. And just for your listeners, the planetarium is a building where you can go and you can look up at the ceiling, and they can show pictures of stars and suns and
Mm,
galaxies, and kind of like astronomy. Well, that's where I was on the other side in this beautiful planetarium. Well, there was a gentleman behind me, and I never turned around to look at him. I don't know why. I just heard him. And he said, "Let's begin." And before I get too much farther, remember I talked about people having jobs on the other side, things that they like to do?
yeah.
This gentleman, he loved to study astronomy. And what he does on the other side is he runs the planetarium. That's one of the things he likes to do. He knew everything about it. And he said to me, "Let's begin." And all of a sudden, all the lights went off. It was pitch black. So I sat down in the seat, and he said, "When you look at the stars, this is what you see." And what he meant was, everybody on Earth, all of humanity at their level of knowledge and development, this is what they see when they look up at the stars. And all of a sudden, all the planets of our solar system started showing up. First, it was Earth, then our sun, then Jupiter and Venus and Uranus and Neptune, all of our planets. And then it disappeared. And then he said, when we look at the stars, meaning all the people on the other side with their level of development and knowledge, he said, when we look at the stars, this is what we see. And all of a sudden, he started showing dozens of planets then hundreds of planets, then thousands, and then millions of planets. And he said, there is far more life in the universe than you can possibly know. And I think what they wanted me to tell people from this was two things. The first one was that Earth is not the only inhabited planet. And then, second, is that Earth is not the only place where we can have lifetimes. There are virtually billions of other worlds that we can have lifetimes on. And I want to tell your audience something that I learned relatively recently. I was reading an article about an astronomer, and she was trying to explain to people how large the Milky Way galaxy is. And she said, if we had a spaceship that could travel at the fastest speed that we know, which is the speed of light, 186,000 miles per second, if you took that ship to one end of the Milky Way galaxy and went at the speed of light to get to the other end of our own galaxy, it would take 99,000 years.
Mm.
That's how large one galaxy is. Well, have you heard of the Hubble telescope?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I've done a lot of research about the Hubble. It was launched in 1990, and in 1995, they did a study called the Deep Field Study, and they pointed the telescope at a part of space that you couldn't see anything with the naked eye. It looked like there was nothing there. Well, when they developed the pictures, they found over 3,000 galaxies in that one little part of space. Can you imagine? And I can't even wrap my head around this, how many planets there really are in the universe. And they estimate that there are probably billions of galaxies. So if you try to wrap your head around that in terms of how many other worlds there are, it's absolutely unlimited. Even in our own galaxy, just the Milky Way, they think that there are over 100 billion stars. And every one of those stars has at least one planet orbiting that sun. And something else that I thought was so interesting, because I really like astronomy. Scientists so far in 2024, they have found 5,340 planets just outside of our solar system.
Wow.
And that just blew my mind. That's one of the things that I cannot wait to get back to the other side to learn about that, because I love astronomy. That stuff is just so fascinating to me. So
No
that was the
kidding.
planetarium experience. The next place he took me to, have you ever seen what the Supreme Court building looks like?
Yes.
Yeah, this building looked like that. It had
Okay.
the diamond ceiling on top, and it had the columns out front. This one didn't have the marble columns going down the sides. It only had the columns in front. And this building was the biggest one that he took me to see. It was huge. I mean, it was so long, I couldn't see the end of it again, just like the orientation center. So it took me to the inside, and the inside, I knew it was a library. Tons and tons of bookshelves full of books as far as you could see. And anything that you wanted to learn, you could learn at this library. If you wanted to learn about science or the history of music, or you wanted to learn about astronomy or English, everything that you wanted to learn, you could learn here. And there were tons of people in this library. And that's one of the first places where I saw people where they look just like we do. They all have their different appearance, they all wear different clothing. A
Mhm.
lot of people on the other side, they wear like tunics um, or robes of some kind, but you can wear jeans and a t-shirt. It's totally up to everybody, just wears whatever they want to wear. And
Mhm.
every race was there. Every ethnicity, every race, every color, every creed, everything is there. And they look just like we do. Some people are taller, some people are shorter, some have dark hair, some have blonde hair. It's they look just like us.
Mhm.
Well, this library, my guide took me to the left-hand side of it. And on the left-hand side were all these rooms. They looked like study rooms, like you would find in a library today. And they were about as the size of somebody's living room. Well, what they were is they were viewing rooms. Well, the one he took me to, there was a woman sitting there, and she had her back to me, and she had jet black hair that went down to her waist. She was wearing kind of a purplish tunic, and she was watching this video screen. And the only thing I can describe it, it looked like a flat screen TV mounted on a wall. And she was watching this. Well, my guide told me to go closer so I could see what she was watching. Well, she was watching a battle that took place between the Native Americans Plains tribes and the US cavalry. Well, at first I thought she was watching a movie that somebody had made of this battle.
Mhm.
But my guide said she was watching a battle that took place 200 years ago. And I remember
Hmm.
thinking, how was that possible? Because we didn't have video cameras back then. We didn't even have cameras back then. How could she be watching something that happened in the past? And my guide said everything gets recorded. And that just blew my mind. How is that possible? And
Hmm.
the only thing I can think of is that it's God. It's something to do with God that I don't have. I think humans don't have the brain capacity to really understand how that's possible.
Sure.
But every single thing gets recorded. So nobody gets away with anything in life. Everything is recorded. I thought that was absolutely extraordinary because I love history. I'm a big history fan. And one thing I want to do when I get back is I want to go to one of those video rooms and I want to watch what D-Day was really like, what those guys went through on the invasion of France in 1944. And everything that's ever happened in history, you can go and see what it was like. And I thought that was just such an amazing thing you can do on the other side because on the other side, you still learn, but it's just different. It's almost like trying to describe to somebody what is it like to ride a bike, and you can tell somebody until you're blue in the face, but they never really understand it until they
Mhm.
actually ride the bike themselves.
Right.
And that's kind of what it's like. The reason we come into a lifetime to learn through experience.
Wow. That's so cool.
Well, yeah, isn't it cool?
It is so cool. Yeah, this is one of the most in detailed, I think, near-death experiences I've ever heard. And very intricate. Now, this happened to you when you're 21, correct?
Yeah, 21.
So can I ask you this? How did that impact when you came back? Because you said you were gone approximately 7 minutes?
7 minutes.
7 minutes. And then when you came back, did you notice a dramatic shift in the relationships around you? For example, did you tell your parents? Did you tell your friends? Like, how did this impact your relationships when you came back? I'm curious.
Yeah, the only person I told was my mom. In
Oh,
fact,
okay.
yeah, when I was on the other side, I didn't know that I had died because I would
Interesting.
have, yeah, I would have asked so many more questions. In fact, I'll tell you something I did when I get to this next place that I saw. But I told my mom, and there was no such thing in the media about a near death experience. NDEs weren't even around back then. It was 1987.
Mm.
So I didn't really understand what happened until
Mhm.
about a day and a half later because my mom had given me a book, and it was this book was beyond its time. It was by Raymond Moody, and
Mm.
it was called Life After Life.
Yeah.
I read that book and I realized, oh my gosh, I had a near death experience. I was on the other side. And the hardest thing for me was when I came back is I went through a horrific depression
Mm.
for almost a month. I didn't get out of bed because I could not understand how was I supposed to live here on earth knowing what it's like on the other side. And I don't even have the words to describe what it's really like there. When people hear my experience, they think, "Wow, it's wonderful." But it is so much better than I can even describe. And I want to tell you something when I get to the end of my experience that it's it was the end of my experience that I got the courage to live the rest of my life because I thought I had to commit suicide. I didn't want to be here
Oh.
anymore. It was a horrible, horrible depression. I had to learn how to walk with one foot on the other side and the other foot here on earth
Mm.
and try to combine those so I wouldn't feel like how am I ever going to make it here? Well, let me tell you what happened next. The next place my guide took me to was a castle, in a castle just like you think about in England, medieval England. It was made of stone, absolutely beautiful, huge castle. It was perfect. And he wanted me to tell people that on the other side, not only can you learn by going to these video rooms in the library, but the other side also has all the buildings on the other side that represented Earth in Earth time. So if you wanted to learn about the pyramids are on the other side. The castles are on the other side. So you can learn by actually going to these places. Well, he told me to let's walk inside the castle. So we walked in, and the first thing I noticed was this beautiful red carpet that went all the way through this castle. It felt like it was royalty. Well, when you walked in, you felt like you were a royalty. And on both sides of the walls, there were life-size paintings. And what these life-size paintings were of kings and queens and princes. Everybody who lived at that time period is in this castle. So you can actually go there. You can walk in, you can look and see what this person looked like. Let's say King George, for example. You wanted to see all about King George. You could go to this castle, you could look up and see his painting, what he looked like in that life and what he wore. But not only that, but in the front of every one of these pictures, going all the way down, were podiums. And on the podium was a book. Well, each book in front of these pictures, the book is about that person's lifetime in everything. You could read about the decisions that they made. You could read about did they treat their people kindly? You can read about the wars. Everything that that person had in that lifetime is in that book, and you can read about it. Well, just about then, there was on the right hand side of me. Remember how castles have those stairwells? They have stairwells that kind of like in a circle that go up to the next floor.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's what this castle had. And I looked over to my right because there was a woman who was walking down the circular stairwell. And she had strawberry blonde hair about shoulder length. And she was wearing kind of a peach, kind of a gown or a robe of some kind. And she walked up to me. She could see me. And she walked up and she said, "Is there anything I can help you with?" And I said the stupidest thing I could ever have said. And I still kick myself to this day. You know what I said to her?
Right.
I said, "No, thanks. I'm just looking." I
Yeah.
can't believe I did that. I could have asked this girl anything. Where am I? What's going on? I thought I was going to be having surgery. What is this place? Who are you?
Right.
I didn't ask her any of those. Well, my guide said what she loves to do on the other side is she loves to learn history. She was a total history buff about that period of Earth's history. So if you were on the other side and you wanted to learn about a time on Earth's history in medieval Europe, not only could you go to those viewing rooms and watch different episodes of life, but you could go to the castle, look at what that person looked like. You could read about them in their book, and you could ask this woman anything about that time period of Earth's history. She was like she was like what we would call a historian or a scholar. in that particular era of Earth's history, because that's what she loved. And on the other side, people do what they love. And that's one of the things that I can't wait to get back to, is just doing the things that you love to do. Well, here's the last thing that happened. And this was where I was able to get the strength to continue with this lifetime and to do what I was supposed to do, because they didn't show me what they showed me just for me. They showed me
Mhm.
all of this because I'm supposed to share it to anybody who will listen. Well, my guide, he took me to a field, and it was, if you can imagine, the most beautiful wildflower field you've ever seen. Rolling hills in the background, green grass, flowers. He took me there and then he left. So I was standing there by myself. And I remember it was a perfect day. It felt like the sun was out, no clouds, just absolutely the most perfect day. And all of a sudden, a gentleman appeared in front of me. And here's the thing that was so profound, it was Jesus. He
Wow.
didn't tell me it was Jesus, but I just knew. I knew in my soul that this is who we would call Jesus.
Mhm.
And he was wearing a white robe. I could see his hands, I could see his feet, and he was wearing a golden sash, or kind of like a gold belt around his waist. And he had gold colored sandals on that laced up his calves. But when I tried to look at him to see his face, there was so much light, so much energy coming from him that I couldn't see his features.
Hmm.
And that's when he spoke to me. He said, "You must tell them there is no death." And then the very second he said that, I was back in my body.
Wow.
And that's how my experience ended. And
That's
sometimes,
wow.
isn't it though?
That's amazing.
It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
absolutely extraordinary. So what I've
It's
been
just
doing,
yeah.
yeah, ever since that, all I've been trying to do with my life is to share with people what I experienced. Because I sometimes forget what it's like for people to hear my story for the first time. Because for me, I've lived with it for 30 years. I know what happens when we cross, when we die. And
Mhm.
I know that the other side is our home. The earth isn't home. Earth is just a place we come to learn, but it's only temporary. And I forget what it's like for people to hear it for the first time. And that's where I got the strength to know that I've got to get out of this depression. I can't go back until it's my time. So I've got to make the best of it and try to share it with as many people as I possibly can, because it's such a hopeful message. It gives
It
people
is.
hope knowing that their loved ones aren't really gone. They're just in a different place. And when you finish your lifetime, you'll be back together with them and everything will be absolutely perfect.
Well, that's a beautiful story. And you said that originally, when you came back, you fell into a depression because I guess you hadn't integrated the experience and you didn't know how to live that
Exactly.
out here. How long did that depression, was it just a short-term thing? How long
It
did
was a
that
few
depression?
weeks.
Just a few weeks, okay.
Yeah.
And after that, you were able to integrate the experience more and more throughout the years,
Yep.
or
Yeah. It took a while. It was hard because I didn't want to be here.
sure,
I wanted to go back where I was. I wanted to stay there.
yeah, because it was such a wonderful thing compared to here, I guess.
Absolutely.
It is a
It's like night and day when you compare the two. And what makes what remember when I said that it's a really big deal when a person comes to an earth life?
yeah.
It it really is, because all of us go through really hard times. All of us go through our own Mount Everest. And it's a lot of times it's really, really hard. But the other side and what it's like there, it gives you the strength to know that you can survive anything. And while you're here, you want to try to make the most of it, to try to make the most of your life, learn everything you can, experience everything you can, because the hardship that everybody goes through at some point, and everybody has hardship, the storms don't last forever. And the important thing is what you learn from having gone through that storm, because that's what you take with you. That's what's valued on the other side, the kind of person you become for having gone through your life. That's what really matters to the other side. And that's what matters to us when we're on the other side. Because nobody can take away from you that kind of like that badge of courage that you earned by finishing your lifetime. And it's something that you have for eternity.
Hmm. So you only shared the story with your mom, but I presume it's been several years now. Your father's found out about this, your other family. How did they react to this?
I never actually told my dad because my dad was very Catholic.
Okay.
And I was I was hoping that in the later years of my dad's life that I would have a chance to talk to him.
Hmm.
And we had a kind of a a rough relationship
Okay.
until about 10 years ago when I really started getting into his life more, having much more communication with him, much more understanding and learning about his life because he was very Catholic. He didn't want to hear about anything else that wasn't part of Catholicism.
Sure.
So I lost my dad in December of last year. And it was at a point where we were having really good conversations. And he was telling me that he was 90 when my dad passed.
Hmm.
And we had conversations about he can't wait to see his parents. He can't wait to see his brothers. And so
Hmm.
we had a lot of conversations about that. And I thought I was going to have more time to tell him what I experienced and that he was going to go home again and that he had lived a great life and he had learned so much and how proud I was of him for coming into his life and doing what he did. But I never got that chance because he had some kind of horrible kidney disease,
Hmm.
and it took him out in a very short period of time. So that's something I regret that I didn't have a chance to talk to him more about that. But I know where he is, and I know that when my time comes, I'll have a chance to have those conversations with him again. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Very, very nice. So you've gone on to get married and have children, is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, I'm married.
Uh,
I've got 2 boys. I have a 22-year-old and a 21-year-old, and I've told them my story. They know that I go on these shows and I share my experience, but
mhm.
they're so busy in their own lives that
Sure.
they haven't really thought about, well, what is dad talking about when he goes on these shows? What is he sharing? So
Yeah,
they're kind of like just kind of in their own world right now,
sure.
which I understand. That's how I was like when I was in my 20s too.
Yeah. Now, how about your wife? How does she respond to this story?
She's actually she was into it even more than I was.
Oh,
She had been studying spirituality for years,
okay.
and she has kept a dream journal for most of her life, and
Mm.
she's actually had dreams from the other side. Oh,
Wow.
something I'll tell you that do we still have a few minutes?
We still have a few minutes. Go ahead.
Okay. I had a dream 8 years ago when my father-in-law died. When he crossed over, a couple days later, I had a dream. And normally, I don't remember my dreams, just like I don't remember what I ate for dinner last night. But I had this dream, and in the dream, he came to me and he spoke to me and he said, "Everything is going to be all right. We're all going to be together again. Give it everything you've got. And please tell my family I'm okay." Well, the second I had the dream, I woke up my wife and told her what had just happened. And she had me write down everything that her dad told me. And the
Hmm.
part that really stuck with me the most was when he said, "Give it everything you've got." Because he was referring to life.
Yeah.
Life here is only temporary. And it's what we learn and what we experience that's what we take with us. And it's so important to live your life in such a way that you know that you're only here temporarily and to give it everything you've got. And that's the only thing that I've ever had since my near death experience that you would think would be like of a paranormal nature.
Mhm.
Normally I don't really get anything like that, but I got that from my wife's dad, and that's something that I always think about because it's so powerful.
Okay, so that leads me to this question then. A number of people that have near-death experiences seem to come back with certain spiritual gifts and different things, psychic awarenesses and what. So what I'm hearing you saying is there hasn't been any major type of things like that happen to you, except this situation with the dream. Is that what I'm hearing correct?
That's exactly correct. I didn't
Okay.
come back with anything. The only thing I think that they gave me was the ability to remember everything I saw.
Okay. That is, well,
I
that's precious.
Yeah, because
That's
it's so
that's
weird. It's so weird because I remember every single nuance, the buildings that I saw, what people were wearing, what they said to me, what what I learned there. All of that is like it happened yesterday, which is so weird because I normally have a really bad memory.
so this is the strongest memory that you have in your life is this near-death experience.
Oh my gosh, yeah,
and,
absolutely. It's
and
like
some 30 years later, and it's still
yeah,
just as crystal clear today as it was then.
exactly. Yep,
I
exactly.
I think that's pretty extraordinary, and I think that's an important point to yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say that that situation, that near-death experience you had, was even more realistic than you and I talking right now?
It was more real than
More
anything
real.
I've ever experienced here. And people have asked me, they said, "Well, how do you know that it wasn't a dream or some kind of a hallucination?"
Mm-hmm.
And I know because the doctors confirmed that I was actually gone. I was
Mm-hmm.
really dead. I
Right.
didn't have any dreams. It wasn't a hallucination because I wasn't awake.
Yeah.
And when I do have dreams, I might remember them for 15 minutes when I wake up, but then I totally forget about them the rest of the
Sure.
day.
Sure.
And this experience, the experience that I had, it was it was no dream like I could ever have imagined. I don't have the ability to
Okay.
try to create something like what I saw over there.
Okay.
It's absolutely extraordinary what I saw.
All
And
right.
that's something that's there for it's for all of us. All of us have such a wonderful thing to look forward to when it's our time to go. And I think that's what they want me to tell people the most is that when you die, there's nothing to be afraid of. The
Mhm.
biggest fear of humanity is death. And dying, it's like stepping out of a car or taking off your jacket. It's as easy as that. And before you know it, you're back on the other side again. So there's
Fantastic.
nothing to fear about dying, not at all.
Nothing to fear about dying. So maybe you kind of answered it then, because that was my final question to you. If you could leave one thing for people, what would be a pearl of wisdom? But maybe that was it, that we don't need
Yeah,
to worry about dying. Is that your major
there's
message from this?
absolutely nothing to fear. It's very
Nothing to fear.
natural. It's the only way to get back home. That's how it was designed by God, and it's very natural, and it's supposed to happen. It's part of life. That's how we get back home again.
Beautiful. Now, I just want to end on this though. I just want to ask you, are you open to people contacting you in any way? Do you have a
Abs-
website or a Facebook?
abso-
How can people get in touch
Absolutely.
with you?
Yeah, definitely. Anybody can email me. I'll give you my email or the one I use the most.
Okay.
And it's John J. Davis 65 at iCloud.com. And
Okay,
I am more than happy. Anybody can write me anytime and I'll get back to them as soon as I can. I
we'll
love
put
talking to people and answering questions.
okay, great. We'll put it on the screen here for people. So
Sure.
feel free to reach out to John if you have any questions. John, it's been a real pleasure having you on the show today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I so enjoyed it. Thanks, Dale.
All right. Thanks everyone for another edition. This has been another edition of Soul Inspire. See you next time. The Soul Inspire podcast is brought to you by DaleCross.net. Discover the freedom, bliss, and ecstasy within you. At DaleCross.net, I can help connect you with your soul's purpose, passion, and mission. Your soul signed up for something great. Discover what it is with the tools I offer. Book a free one-on-one consultation now at dalecross.net and live your greatness.